let's talk to people who have a real understanding of how dictatorships evolve. And I don't think the press has done enough. Maybe he wouldn't jail all of his political opponents. Maybe he wouldn't try to force out of business the members of the press who didn't agree with him. Maybe this would be our last election.
They really do believe he's Hitler. Well, she's back. Hillary Clinton was dragged out of her drunken stupor to give a very important interview to Morning Joe, because they're very important journalists on a very important show, and only very important people listen. And as you can see from the very grim faces staring back at you right now, they had very important matters to discuss. I know this may shock you, but they're going to spend a little bit of time comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler.
I find myself thinking back, and people will say I'm being too dramatic. I don't think I am. I'm thinking back to a Richard Cohen column that was written probably in 2007, 2008, where he talked about this scene around a lake in Germany in 1937, and how peaceful and how beautiful it was, and everybody was going about their business. 1937, kids were playing. And then he said nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw it. A year later, the world had changed. Jews were being rounded up, slaughtered, executed. So we find ourselves in this sort of a dilemma. We seem to talk about him so much, and yet I don't know that people are really getting their arms around just what a threat a democracy, American democracy, the American experiment is facing right now. Help us out with that, if you will.
Joe, I think you make a really important point. I mean, it's one thing to cover the circus, and the circus is covered. I mean, people can't stop covering the circus. Every utterance, every insult, every outrageous action or comment, it gets covered. The context is often missing. What does that really mean? And I think it's imperative, especially for members of the press who understand, as you were just pointing out, the world has been here before. People did not take the kind of threats that we saw in the 1930s as seriously as they should, including American journalists. People were taking at face value that, this can be controlled. He may have said some outrageous things, but the institutions will hold. A determined demagogue, unfortunately supported by members of his political party, other enablers, people who care more about a future tax cut than the sanctity of the Constitution, are falling in line behind him. They are trying to excuse some of the most outrageous things that you just recited. And I don't think the press has done enough to basically say, okay, the circus is here. You can watch the circus. But let's tell you what that means. Let's talk to people who have a real understanding of how dictatorships evolve. Let's look at the people that he admires and what they've already done. Back in 2016, we didn't have interviews with him. We didn't have a track record of 4 years in office. There was a lot of speculation. And, I understood that people wouldn't take what I said necessarily as gospel about what I thought could happen. I get that.
All right, there's more, but I couldn't last any longer. I had to jump in here. First of all, understand everything that she's saying right now. She's blaming the media for not being tough enough on Trump, right? You're getting that, right? You're reading between the lines here. The media's not giving us enough context about how Trump really is literally Hitler. And back in the 30s, even American media didn't quite see what was coming. Yeah, that would be your friends at the New York Times, by the way, who still haven't really made amends for the fact that they never mentioned the Holocaust as it was happening, even though it was, I don't know, what's the word, news, because we actually had Jews escaping from Europe and actually telling what was going on, and the New York Times ignored it. La, 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 la. This is the same New York Times who won a Pulitzer Prize for lying about the famine in the Soviet Union under Stalin. And they've never given that Pulitzer Prize back, even though it was literally communist propaganda. Those are your friends that you're talking about there, Hillary. But are we not tired of the whole Trump is Hitler and this is how we get a dictator sort of narrative, especially considering that they're telling that story as literally the president of the United States is using the Justice Department and his allies in the Democratic Party who run some cities' prosecution arms to jail his political opponent? Isn't this how we get a dictator? Isn't this how we get authoritarianism? But it's actually, it gets worse for a minute, in a moment. But I wanted to pause here also because of what Hillary just said. I get it that what I was saying back in 2016, people didn't take as gospel. Gospel? We didn't believe a freaking word that came out of your mouth, let alone committed to the gospel, because you're a liar. You have been your entire career, and you lied your way through the 2016 campaign. And everybody knows it, and nobody believes her. And here's Joe and Mika trying to make the case that this is a grave, grave matter and very, very serious and very, very important. So who are we going to bring on to make the case? The liar that nobody believed then and nobody believes now. How serious can this be when the best person you can bring out to warn us is a liar? Oh, but believe her now, please. But then get this, because this is priceless. And I wanted to make sure that we dealt with everything she just said, take a deep breath, and then soak in the next observation from Hillary.
But now we know. We've seen him and we've heard him. And so we need to do a better job of making it absolutely clear that someone who says these things, maybe he wouldn't jail all of his political opponents. One is one too many. Maybe he wouldn't try to force out of business the members of the press who didn't agree with him. One is one too many. We go down the line. And maybe this would be our last election, because someone who will not accept the validity of an election is someone who doesn't believe in elections. He believes in his own power, his own right to power, and his demand that he be installed regardless of whether he gets the votes or not.
Yes, my friends, that was Hillary Clinton saying that. And as she said those words, Joe and Mika did not say, wait a minute. Seriously? I'm sorry, Hillary, have you ever met this person, Hillary Clinton? Has Hillary actually ever had a conversation with Hillary Clinton? The Hillary Clinton that said things like this?
The one thing that Trump is fearful of when it comes to his being president is that finally we will see how illegitimate his victory actually was.
Yeah, that's the Hillary Clinton I'm talking about. That's also this Hillary Clinton.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
And this is a video at RNC Research you should look at yourself, because it is literally, as they say there, 24 minutes of Democrats denying election results. And now we have Hillary Clinton, very serious and very grim, on Joe and Mika saying, someone who denies the results, the legitimate results of an election. Well, they only believe in their own power. But then preceding that, maybe he won't jail all of his political opponents, but one is too many. Oh, and then Joe and Mika say, oh, that's a great thought. You know what? Hold on a moment, because we now have to cut to the criminal trial of Donald Trump in Manhattan right now over a bogus, made-up crime that the prosecutor still hasn't actually defined for the court. So hold that thought about jailing your political opponents, Hillary, because we got to cover this trial. Maybe he won't put out of business every journalist that dissents from him, but one is one too many. I'm sorry. Exactly. Not put in jail, put out of business. Did we see what happened when journalists dared to challenge the validity of the COVID-19 shot or the ivermectin effectiveness? We just talked about this yesterday with Chris Cuomo, where they literally censored and deleted accounts and suspended people from social media. As Joe Biden's White House utilized the Justice Department to put pressure on companies to silence and put out of business effectively those journalists who made those claims. Do they have no self-awareness? I'll answer my question. They have full self-awareness. They are just so comfortable and confident lying to you. And as this comes, and there's more to this, but I just want you to bear in mind something. As they continue to compare Donald Trump to Hitler, you have to keep absorbing one thought here that is critically important, because they recognize more than anyone else that if Donald Trump gets into office, it's because you voted for him. Their anger and their scare tactics are not about Donald Trump. They're about you. They hate you for even thinking about voting for Donald Trump. They really do believe he's Hitler. Okay, let's think this through for a second. What kind of person supports and votes for Hitler? The answer is a Nazi. And that's what they think of you. Hillary's made the mistake of saying it out loud before. You know, you deplorables. How you feeling in that little basket of deplorables? All right, more with Hillary.
Be your message to those skeptical or disillusioned voters who say, I'm going to look somewhere else, or I might just stay home this fall?
Please look at the whole picture. And also think about yourself. Think about the kind of future you want, what kind of country you want to live in, whether you value freedom or whether you want to give it up to people who want to change the way that America has tried to work and our values that we've tried to aspire to and fulfill. And, you know, when people ask me about the Biden-Trump race, my answer is very clear. We have two old candidates. One is, yes, old and effective, has passed legislation that I think is going to put America on such a strong footing for the future, is compassionate, cares about people, tries hard to make the right decision, and they are complicated. The other is old and dangerous. I mean, why is that a hard choice for people? I think every one of us has an obligation as a citizen to try to figure out, waking up the morning after the election, do I want to throw my vote away? Do I want to not vote and let somebody who doesn't agree with me or care about me essentially fill that vacuum that I left? Or do I want to feel like, okay, maybe I'm not ecstatic about the outcome, but I'm safe. I'm not going to have to worry about what might happen to the economy, because we've got somebody who took us out of COVID, has tackled inflation, the best economy in the world right now. Let's not mess with that. There's just so much. And, I think it's also important to say that, as Hakeem Jeffries, who is the majority leader in the House, said the other day, and I think he's done an amazing statesman-like job, he said, if you can overturn Roe v. Wade, you can overturn Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and a lot of things that many, many Americans not only take for granted, but really rely on. So I think the future is at stake, not just in a big abstract way, but in everybody's life and family.
There you go, you disillusioned voters. That's the message. I'm sure, that's going to get a lot of votes. Don't you think? She did barely touch on the economy at the very end there, but I don't know. I'm thinking that when the message is be terrified of Donald Trump, you think about the beginning part of that answer before she flipped around to the economy and lied to you about how wonderful things are. She said, yeah, they're both old, right? I get it. And they both pretty much suck. But at least only one of them is somebody you got to be terrified of from stealing your rights away from you. And oh, by the way, as Hakeem Jeffries said, they're going to take your Social Security too. That's the message. They're so desperate. They're so incredibly desperate. And again, I want to reiterate, having to trot her out to send the message, the single most unlikable politician in America, that she's the one to wave the banner for you. It tells you how bad things are. I also want to point out, as I often like to do, Joe and Mika not in the same space again. Joe couldn't even bring it upon himself to come up to New York and be in the room with the interview with Hillary Clinton. He's down in the garage in Tampa, wherever they are in Florida. And here's Mika. She's actually at the table, but they have to pretend they're talking into a camera right now, even though they're literally in the same space.
What do you say to people when they ask you about the former president, these trials and these delays and the fear that they feel about the upcoming election?
Well, Mika, I'm happy to go to therapy with you anytime.
I am so sorry. I'm mistaken. She's in Florida too. I'm taking a look at the set now, and I realize that she is in Florida as well. She's with Joe. Neither of them. They love and respect Hillary so much. Here we go. We landed Hillary for a live in-studio interview. Let's go. And they're like, yeah, we like it in Florida too much. We'll just stay here in the garage. You guys handle things up there. Willie Geist is the one who's actually on set with him. I know it's a small thing, but I just find it amazing every time I see it. They are sitting in a set in their garage with a picture of the White House behind them. And they can't even bother to, take the 3-hour flight up to New York and sit on set with Hillary Clinton. It makes me. All right, go ahead.
Because clearly the pressure and the stress on our system, our country, our Constitution, our future is so intense for those of us who understand what's at stake. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way to others, but if you've been in this world as you and I have, and you've studied it and you've watched it, it is a very difficult time right now. Justice delayed is justice denied. And the people in our country, it looks as though will most likely go to vote without knowing the outcome of these other very serious trials. And the one that is going on now currently in New York is really about election interference. It is about trying to prevent the people of our country from having relevant information that may have influenced how they could have voted in 2016 or whether they would have voted. I think that the defendant, the former president, knew exactly what he was doing when he went to such great lengths to try to squash, bury, kill stories, pay off people, because he understood the electoral significance of them. So
this would have been a great moment for, a journalist or a television show host to be on the set during this interview. Sadly, they didn't have anyone like that. They only had Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, and Willie Geist, who, of course, none of them apparently are interviewers, journalists, or well-read individuals who know things, because this would have been a great opportunity to say, I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment. I'm going to let you finish, Hillary. I am. But you're talking about election interference in 2016 and this whole Stormy Daniels thing, and I get it. I get your perspective on that. But you paid for the Russian Steele dossier. You paid millions of dollars through 2 different partition groups, the DNC and a law firm, to pay a former MI6 spy to create a full fictional dossier with made up make-believe stories about Donald Trump. And then you tried through intermediaries to get it out there in the media and the press. A couple of people published it, Mother Jones and Bill Kristol of all people. But ultimately that ended up triggering a fake, phony FBI investigation into Donald Trump. Would you not call that election interference? I mean, I know you think that Donald Trump signing a non-disclosure agreement with someone who threatened to tell a fake story about him to the media is election interference. And I suppose, well, actually, while we're on that subject, have you guys ever paid anyone for a non-disclosure agreement about your husband's extramarital activities? I'm just curious. Ever done that? Did your campaign back in 1992 have a whole division led by George Stephanopoulos called Bimbo Eruptions, where you would handle women who had stories about your husband? Because was that election interference? Again, I'm sorry. You opened the door here on election interference. So I'm just asking the question. I'll let you finish, but first address that, because I think maybe our viewers deserve to know where you stand on these things. Again, that would have been a great opportunity for a question like that, but we only had Joe and Mika and Willie Geist to work with. So, you get what you get when you watch MSNBC.
I think that this is not, though, about the past, because the other cases are about election interference. And he's practically promised us, if you listen to him at his rallies, you read his interview with Time Magazine, that if he doesn't like the way the election turns out, he's going to do something again to try to prevent the lawful winner from taking office. I mean, I was Secretary of State traveling around the world on behalf of our country, trying to persuade leaders to believe in democracy, to believe in the peaceful transfer of power, to accept election results after appropriate challenges were made. And, Trump had all the time in the world to make those challenges, and he was shut down by courts. He was denied by Republican as well as Democratic election officials because there was no evidence. This is all about power, how to get it, how to keep it, how not to give it up.
Well, she would know. I'll tell you, I think what really concerns Hillary Clinton more than anything else is that Donald Trump has learned the lesson of his first term, and that whole lock her up thing that he decided to be magnanimous about and say, you know what, she's been through enough. We're not going to investigate her, which is probably one of the biggest mistakes Donald Trump ever made as president. I think maybe he'll try to rectify that. Maybe his new attorney general might want to look into the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation and the Hillary Clinton campaign finance infrastructure during the 2016 election and her culpability with the illegal activities revolving around the Russian collusion hoax. That's what's bothering Hillary Clinton right now. Trust me, she's not carrying any water for Joe Biden. They don't even like each other, never have. Don't forget, it was Hillary Clinton and Joe Podesta who torpedoed Joe Biden's plan to run in 2016. Oh yeah, look that up. That's exactly what happened. So listen, great to hear from Hillary. I think I'm done with this because, we've done 20 minutes with Hillary Clinton. And personally, I'm starting to feel a little nauseous.